live with our latest initiative here at Agile Ventures, and that is the community training program that we put together, that we gave a name that is called Work the Web, and hopefully we will cover a lot of ground and get smarter along the way. It's a 9-week program, and this is the first session. I have with me quite a few people in my Google Meet. So you will be hearing those voices as well. If you watch the recording or if you're catching us on Twitch, you know that you can always also join a Google Meet when we stream if you want to take more active participation and chat to us while we're doing this. So we're going to be online for approximately hour and a half. I will be doing a bit of talking along the way, and hopefully we will squeeze in a short break somewhere in the middle, because an hour and a half of listening to my voice could be a little bit too much. And I am a great fan of talking. I'm a talker, and I love the sound of my voice. So please remind me if I'm running over time and you guys are falling asleep. Don't just leave, just say something like, please, Thomas, could we take a break or something? And I am always up for that. So don't worry about this. Whether it's a bio break or a coffee break or whatever is your poison, just let's do breaks. I'm considering whether I should move. Oh no, that's not it. That's not what I wanted. That's the camera, right? I'm gonna move my camera to the next side on Twitch, and I'm actually gonna make myself a little smaller. I know it's against my philosophy to make myself smaller, but I also have this chat box that I need to move out of the way, and this is just for the streamers and for the recording. Right. Okay. So let's get started. Work the web, the course introduction. This is session 1, so that's what we're gonna do. Hello world. Everything starts with hello world, as I usually say. I'm Thomas. I sit at the helm of Agile Ventures, the charity that is responsible for this training program, and I am also a head coach at a coding bootcamp in Sweden that is called Craft Academy. I'm an entrepreneur. I can't say if I'm a good entrepreneur or a bad entrepreneur. I don't think there is such a thing. There are only entrepreneurs. I'm currently involved in 3 companies. I have a few successes behind me, but I also have a few failures behind me, and that's the way it is. I'm a programmer, first and foremost, and I love to solve problems. That's my thing. I love puzzles and all sorts of different kind of things, and I work across the entire stack. So I call myself a full stack developer. We will talk a little bit more about that. You can find me on various social media platforms. I usually present myself with my full name, so that's Thomas Hochman. And I have an email address that is covered on stream and on YouTube, but it is Thomas with an H at craftacademy.se, and it should say Thomas at agileventures.org, but I was in a hurry when I created this slide, so it's not correct. Well, you can reach me at craftacademy.se if you want. Now, I have very strong opinions about things in life, and I love to throw these opinions at people. And I also enjoy people with strong opinions, and I love when they throw them at me. So you can basically say that I do enjoy a good difference of opinions. And why do I say that? Well, because I will make a lot of claims throughout those 9 weeks that we will spend together, hopefully. And you don't necessarily always have to agree with me. And if you don't, it is totally fine to speak up if the timing is right. Sometimes we just want to skim over some stuff and don't go into any heated debates. But please take it up if you have a different opinion here live on in a session or on Slack later on or what have you. But having strong opinions and being passionate about things is a good thing, it's a virtue, and I am very passionate. And I swear a lot, and I promised Anya that I will cut down on all the F words. I am a Catholic boy. Usually, when I grew up, I was at least, so I shouldn't swear that much. So, I'll try to keep things in order, right, Ethan? I do swear a lot, right? He's doing a thumbs up. Yeah. Yep. Yep. Right. So we do. I mentioned Anya already. She's the one keeping me in check in terms of swear words. But we do have teaching assistants throughout this journey. Anya is one of them, and Mike is another one. They will be your companions throughout this journey and help me out. They are both amazing. Perhaps a little bit nervous. I don't know. I will leave the floor to Anya. Say a few words about yourself and introduce you if you can. Well, let me just see if before you do, could you hold on a second? Could you say something? Yeah. Okay. Can we hold on for a second because I managed to fuck up another thing. Mess up another thing. Sorry. Uh, let me just make sure that the sound is coming through, and it doesn't. Let's see. Okay. That's awesome. The sound is not coming through. Let's see. Let's see. Let's see. Let's see. Well. Uh, well, uh, why is this not happening? Oh God. Okay, so you're gonna have to present yourself, and then people on Twitch will not hear it. So, go ahead. They do. They do. That's a fantastic thing. Uh, you know, being open with your struggles is definitely a good thing. So UT61, yes, we have a issue with sound not coming through from the Google Meet. So Anya just introduced herself. You know her. You can catch up with her on her Twitch channel. And it is not intentional. It's just my fault. But she will be your teaching assistant. And Mike, let's hear it from you. And the other guys, we will not hear Mike, but I will hear Mike. Go ahead, Mike. Thank you. Thank you. Mike just spoke about the importance or the benefits of pair programming, which is going to be an integrated part of this course itself. Uh, I'm really sorry about the sound, but that's the way it is. All right, let's talk a little bit about the roadmap of this course. Uh, First and foremost, it's all about building for the web. Um, so we're going to scope down this course to cover web technologies and everything related to doing that, to building for the web, which means that we will not be building games or entertainment stuff or what have you, or embedded systems and things like that. We are all. This is a course about web technologies, and in that we will cover a lot of things, and these are not in order, apart from the last one, perhaps. We're gonna cover a lot about automated testing and best practices related to that. Of course, we're going to talk a lot about agile methodologies because that's what we are all about here at this charity, and we do believe that this is the best way to build software collaboratively. Everything that is non-trivial will benefit from a good process management and project management methodology. We're going to talk at length and practice software as a service as a delivery model, about distributed applications and how they can scale up and what benefits that delivery model brings today, but also how it revolutionized the software industry over the last decade. It's about coding, right? So we're going to do a lot of back-end development using Node.js and Ruby on Rails, and we're going to do a lot of front-end application development, mainly in React.js once we have covered the basics of vanilla JavaScript and HTML, CSS, and so on, right? And basically, code, code, code. It's all about turning theory into practice and knowing how to do things. And as Mike said, for those of you who heard, it's all about building things together. One of our mantra is never code alone, do things in a social setting. And for that, something that I didn't bring up on this slide that I just did 2 minutes before we started is version control. We're going to use that extensively, of course, so that we can bridge the geographical obstacles that are between us or distances between us and swapping code in matters of seconds using Git and GitHub. So that's the roadmap. And it is a community driven training program. So it's the first iteration of this thing. We call it Work the Web. It's a summer school, but after this summer there will be an autumn and then a winter and then a spring and then another summer, as always, unless the Russian hackers manage to fuck everything up for us. But I would say that being a first iteration, and we do work in an agile way, as always, we put this together and we want to hear your feedback on the roadmap, on the delivery, and everything else, right? So if you're not a member of the community yet, please become a member. Support us if you can. If you can't, you don't have to. Membership is free, but if you want to contribute as an associate member, you can always do that. You can read more about it on the website. Now, there are a few things that comes with the whole thing, and we use Slack, and I know that a lot of the youngsters here are more used to Discord. Yeah, we can build a bridge between Discord and Slack. We've used Slack since 2013-14, so it's hard for us to leave it, but we are exploring various options to integrate that with Discord. A lot of discussions will be held on Slack. There is a specific channel for this training program. It is called Work the Web 2021. So try to see if you can join that Slack channel, and we can keep the asynchronous conversation there between those sessions that we will be hosting. Now, there's so much to talk about, but let me just tell you a little bit about my teaching philosophy, or how this course will be structured. It's all about turning theory into practice. So, very basic setup. I tell you about a technology, I show you that technology, and then you practice using that technology. Okay? These are the three first steps. And we do that in theory sessions, where I can do a demo or a workshop. We're going to do some exercises and projects and so on. But then there is this last pillar in teal that is really important, where it says reflect. Now, I strongly believe that once you have learned something new and you have experienced something for the first time, it is a good thing to stop for a second and see how this new gained insight or new skill fits into the bigger picture, right? What can I use it for? What was hard to understand with the whole thing, and what do I know now that I need to learn after I've taken a step forward. Always in life, very often in life, once a new door opens, your horizon expands and you gain new insights of where should I go next. And for that, we need to sit down and reflect, and we can do it on our own, which I strongly encourage you guys to do, to take a minute or two or 10 after each session to go through your notes and then think about how the topic that we covered in a session fits into the puzzle of all things that needs to make up of a profile of a developer. But we will also do this from time to time together, just to practice, because sometimes when you do things on your own, you kind of don't see the forest for the trees, or vice versa. I don't know. And it's much better to do it in a social setting, because you can learn from other people's insights. And if we do this repetitively, that can actually enhance our learning. And I've seen very good results of that when performed in a collaborative social setting, because people tend to see more value of the things that have been covered, and also, it builds up curiosity and a willingness to move forward in a faster pace. So tell, show, practice, reflect, and I hope that does make sense for you guys. Or any questions on this? Good. Crystal clear. Fantastic. We're going to practice this one way or another. Now, let's cover a little bit of basics. So today we're going to do a bit of theory, a little bit of coding, much less coding than I would hope for, but we need to cover some basics first before we can move on into more advanced topics. So this might be bread and butter for many of you, but let's cover this anyway. The three components that make up every website. And actually the web or the internet as we know it, we do understand, I guess, that the World Wide Web, or the part that we see on our desktop computers or mobile devices, is just one part of everything that's going on the great distributed network that is called the internet. But in terms of web-based applications, every application that you see is made up of three things, and three things alone, at least in terms of what you see, as I said, and that is HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Okay, so HTML is an acronym. It stands for HyperText Markup Language. That is the very basic. That's the very foundation of all websites, and that is the type of file or type of markup that is being loaded by your browser when you look at a website. And the threshold of starting to write HTML is very, very low. You can open up a document in any document or word processing software and just use a few tags like h1, p, or whatever, span, div, and you can create a very, very simple HTML page. It wouldn't look so cool. It would probably carry Times New Roman as a default type font and all of this stuff, but you can get started really, really easy with building something using HTML. So that's one part. That's the structure of the document that you will see in a browser. Now, CSS, another acronym, Cascading Style Sheets, tells the browser or the interpreter of the resource that you're loading um, how to display the content and style it on a window. And that could be how to lay out the entire page. You can work with different colors. Um, Marquee, yes, HTML1. Thank you, Mirsad. Thanks. Um, you can also work with different fonts, font sizes, animations, shapes, some vector graphics, and so on. So CSS in itself is a science. That is what gives every web page an appealing look. Yeah, one could say that. And then comes JavaScript, which is kind of unique among those three components because it's an actual programming language. But it's also a unique language in among all the different programming languages that are around, because it's actually built to be run on the web, and it comes with a lot of functionality that is specifically made for websites and web applications. JavaScript allows you to interact with the various elements of the document that you create using HTML and you style using CSS. You can add interactivity. You can make your websites more dynamic, and so on. And there are plenty of things that you can do to your document using JavaScript. But apart from that, JavaScript is also a programming language. By many considered not a very good programming language, but I would say it is actually much better than the reputation it has. I think we can agree on that, at least after a while. JavaScript is eating the world. Whatever can be written in JavaScript will be probably written in JavaScript in a few years' time. And I have a specific talk about that later on in this course. All right. So, what do you need to know to get by in this course? A very basic knowledge of HTML and a very basic knowledge of CSS. And if you don't have that, then you can practice that using very simple tutorials, and our community teaching assistants will help you with that. It is not a very big thing to learn a little bit of HTML and CSS. We will actually practice a little bit of that today, so don't worry about that. If you have a basic knowledge about programming, that's great. If you don't, then pay close attention, because we will teach you that as well. But most importantly, and that's why I kind of bolded those last statements, you need a desire to learn how to code. Is that even a sentence? A desire to learn how to code? Yes, it is a sentence. It's good. All right, no problems. And also a desire to work together with others. This is not a solo gig. The way we created this course, it is meant to be taken with other people, collaboratively, and actually socially. It's important. And you need a lot of grit. So I've been told, so I had to look it up. What does that even mean? It means courage and resolve. That's copy pasted from Webster's dictionary. Strength of character. I like that. You need a lot of grit, as with everything else in life. Yesterday, I saw The Martian with Matt Damon. I know, Matt Damon. But it was a really good movie. I'm going to tell you. Watch it. And at the end, no spoilers, but at the end, Matt Damon's character says something like this: if you want to survive in an extreme environment, as being stranded on Mars, that's not a spoiler. Everybody knows that this movie is about that. You got to have to take a look at these big problems and break it down into smaller ones, and you solve one problem at a time. And that is how you solve big problems. And that I like that saying, and it sticks with me, because that's what programming is all about. Anything that is more than just a Hello World application, it requires your ability to break down problems into smaller ones and fix them one by one. And before you know it, you have something that is non-trivial, and it's can be pretty complex. Does that make sense, people? Good. Have you seen The Martian yet? Some of you have. All right, that's a good movie. That movie for me is about solving problems one by one and adjusting to new circumstances. I love it a lot. All right. So tools. You will need a code editor, and I do suggest VS Code. And I also suggest that you install some extensions, and we will take a look at least a few of those extensions. Uh, and you don't have to have all of this. You can go and get by using a notepad if you want, but it will be more convenient for you if you actually have a good code editor installed on your machine. And as I said, I prefer VS Code personally. It's open sourced, free, and there is a lot of extensions. And yes, it is less painful to use VS Code than it is to use Notepad. But I lived through the 90s, and I've actually published at least one website where I coded in Notepad. So back then we actually had a badge proudly made with notepad.exe, but that was a long time ago. Nowadays we use VS Code. And you can find this, of course, online at code.visualstudio.com. So head over there and make sure you download VS Code. What's the next slide? Yes, you need a GitHub account. And it's free, so don't worry about that, any costs. And if you don't have one, sign up for GitHub. It's going to be really imperative that you have that account. All your homework or assignments will have to be submitted through GitHub. So make sure you sign up for the service. We will have a specific session about version control in general, and then of course services like GitHub or Bitbucket to showcase how we can share our code online. GitHub is a cloud service. It's like a social network for geeks, if you want to look at it that way. I just use it to store my code. I'm not a geek. I'm a nerd. Right. Now, once you have installed it, or if you already have one, so please send your GitHub username in the Work the Web 2021 channel, so we know, what your GitHub name is. It's going to make things easier for us later on. All right, let's code a little bit, folks, because everything starts with hello world. So we're going to do a hello world application in JavaScript and HTML and a little bit of CSS. Okay? All right. I'm actually creating a terminal chess game in Ruby. Should I take the camp anyway, or do you think it's not a good? Well, if you create whatever you code, you can take this course. Again, we are talking mainly about web-based applications, but we're gonna do we're gonna do some Ruby. So it's up to you, of course. I'm just reading out a question I got on Twitch. Right. Let's move this out of the way, and also this, and Slack can move, and we're just gonna open up a terminal. Right, where's my terminal? There it is. Right. I'm gonna make this a little bigger, and I'm gonna create a folder that I will call Work the Web. Right. And I'm going to cd into this folder. So do we have people that are not familiar with the terminal with us? We will have a section on how to use the terminal a bit later, both in OS X and on Linux, or if there are some poor souls that are using Windows, that's also going to be covered. Mirsad is smiling. I feel for you, brother. I do feel for you. Let's get by with the knowledge we have and see if we can get a little bit of let's see what's going on. There we go. Right. So I cd into this, and I want to create a new file. So in my terminal, I can say touch, and then I can say index.html. And I guess on Linux we're gonna have to do what? I think we can touch on Linux as well, right? And in iTerm as well, I guess. Yes. And so now I'm just going to open this up in my VS Code. So in my terminal, I can type code space dot and hit enter, and that would open up VS Code in that particular folder. So it would look something like this. And we can see that we have the work the web folder, and I kind of just made a mistake. I made a mistake, guys. Do you want to back it up with me? I think it's better if we do. So I'm going to actually rm index. So rm stands for remove, and then I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm going to say hello world. Like this, and cd into hello world. And then I'm going to make an index HTML again. I wanted to create a subfolder and I forgot, and I'm sorry about that. So inside of the work the web folder, I want to create an hello world subfolder, of course, because that's what we're going to work with. And then I want to create the index HTML, and then I want to open this up in my VS Code. And also look at this now. This is pretty amazing, or at least I was amazed first time I saw this happen. If I click the index HTML file and place my cursor on line 1, then something magical can happen. If I just type the letters HTML, I have a pop-up coming up on my screen, and it says HTML, HTML5, HTML, XML. Right? It's an Emmet abbreviation. There's a tool beside it. If we choose HTML5, click on it, or just choose and hit enter, we will get some code for free. It scaffolds a little bit of the document structure for us, and that's pretty amazing, because the less code we have to write ourselves, the better, right? So this is a very, very basic structure of an HTML5 document. I will cover this more in text. We don't have to go through every detail, but know this: there is a head section and a body section. The head section is where a lot of metadata, like the data about the document, goes, and the body section is the actual part that is visible to your users in the browsers. So let's go to the body section, place our cursor there, and just type the letter H and 1. No tag opener, nothing, and you will see a pop-up, another tool saying H1. You hit enter and you get more code for free. And you might think, like, why is he talking about this? Is this important? Well, it's not important in a Hello World application with just a H1, but it becomes more and more important when you write more advanced code, and when you get more extensive code snippets for free. Then you're very happy about it. Let me tell you. And you can configure this yourself if you want to have Emmet extensions or code snippets that you use a lot in your own coding. You can configure VS Code to give you those code snippets for free. Anyhow, here inside of the H1, we just want to say hello world. And that's it. We could now go back to our terminal, and instead of opening up a browser and navigating to that or through a file system or what have you, we can just issue this command. We can say open index.html, and note that I didn't type index.html. I just said IN and then I hit the tab button. Look, IN and tab, and the computer writes for me. Also a good thing to understand, so you don't have to type everything, because the more you type, the more typos you do, right? And typos are really bad for programmers. There's a lot of gray hair on this scalp that is attributed to typos and searching for the bugs. If I now hit enter on my computer, a browser pops up and we can see hello world. And that's the hello world application, right? Yeah, but it's not that cool, right? We can do better than that, can't we? So let's do it. Beneath the hello world tag on line 10, in my case, we can add another tag that is called script. Okay, and so in the script tag, whatever is between the opening and the closing tag will be interpreted as JavaScript and it will be executed by the browser. And I deliberately put it on the bottom of the body tag for reasons that are known to some people and will be revealed to the beginners later in another demo, because I talk too much anyway. What I want to do now is to create a variable, or a constant in this case, and I will call the constant a header, for instance, header element, and I will ask the document to get me an element, get element by tag name. Do you see that I got a lot of suggestions, right? So if I say get element, I can choose between various options. So I choose the one tag name. I think I can use tag name, can't I? I think I can, right? And the tag name I want to choose is H1. But that's going to be a collection, right, Mirsad? That's a collection. If we do elements by tag name, that's going to get, yeah. So that, I'm not going to use that one, actually. Right. No, I'm going to do get element by ID, by ID. Get element by ID. That's better. And we're going to open parentheses, open and close parentheses, and insert a string. And I usually use single quotes. We can debate that till the end of dawn, end of days. And I'm going to call this a header. And which means that I have to go back to line 10, and inside of the H1 element, I have to give this guy an ID that will be called header. Right, so we give this guy an ID, header, and we are looking for that and storing that element inside of this constant. And then I'm going to say header element dot inner text equals hello Mars. Okay, and Pedro, is your VS Code giving you a hard time? That's not very nice. You're gonna have to reboot your computer later. It should not actually. I mean, these things should be built in. Uh, that's probably what it is, Pedro. Patience. There's a Guns N' Roses song about that. Yeah, it could be also. Are you on a VM or a dual boot or anything? No? Yeah. Mirza, I didn't want to say that. I didn't want to say that. Right. All right. I, I can, but it shouldn't be an extension. Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. So Emmet shouldn't be. I don't think yeah. No, Emmet should be installed by default. So that's not an extension that I'm using at all. I have extensions for React and some Ruby and some other stuff, but this should be function working out of the box. Anyhow, let's move on to line 12 and 13. What we're doing on line 12 is just grabbing this element, storing it in a constant called header element, and then on line 13 we're just changing the text from hello world to hello Mars. And if I now, of course, save and reload this, we can see that it says hello Mars now. Okay, should we make this a little slower so we can actually see how it works? So I'm just going to inspect this, open up my developer tools, hopefully today. There it is. Now my computer is slow too. I should be okay. Right. And I will go back to my code and I will write the following. I would write this word, debugger, right above the constant declaration. Okay. And I will reload, save of course, and reload this guy, and the execution of my code will stop on line 12. And we often talk about lines of code, so get used to that because it's really important. So line 12 is where the code stopped, and we have like a navigation controls here, a blue arrow and like a kind of curved arrow beside that. Hopefully you guys can see that on your computers as well. And so if I click on the curved one, we can see that the execution jumps down to line 13, right? And if I now go to the console, line 13 it hasn't been run yet. So if I try to say header element, we can see that there is a reference error. We haven't yet set that constant, right? So if I click on the curved arrow again and go back to my console, there's a tab navigator there, and I do header element again, now we can see that it has content. It has something in it. And that it would be the element that says hello world. And if I place my cursor over this element, we can also see that it is being highlighted in the display window, which is a very good thing. Perhaps not that good right now when we only have one thing to display, but it will come into play later on when we have more complex user interfaces. And so if I click on this guy again, and we can note that it says hello world, right? And if I click on the curved arrow again, it now jumps down yet another line. The text is being changed because we told our JavaScript to change that, and the display shows hello Mars. Now, if we don't use a debugger, we will never see this, of course, because it happens so fast. But if we step through the whole thing, which is actually the term we use, step through your code, you can see and follow the execution and the logic of every program. In this very trivial example, there's not much logic, of course, but I just wanted to show you the concept of debugging, and it's important that you start using that concept and that tool as soon as possible, because it will save your life later on. Debugging is extremely, extremely important. And that's about it. That's what we came here to do. We came here to do a very basic Hello World application, and we are done with that, folks. Uh, and we went to Mars to say hello to Matt Damon, which is an achievement in itself. Uh, boys and girls, we're going to take a 5-minute break, and after that I will torture you a little more with more theory before we call it quits for today. So I'm gonna grab something to drink, stretch my legs, and get ready for the next session. See you soon, boys and girls. Cheers. All right, folks, I'm back. I am back. Um, there is some chatter. Another folder. Oh, so it worked if you when you opened another folder. Okay. Uh, hmm, that's weird. Sometimes computers. What are you gonna do, right? Technology. Windows. Yes, of course, Windows. Um, we of course mean that with a lot of heart. Um, we don't we don't hate on Windows too much. Um, and then Linux in there, right? Yeah, yeah. All right, folks. Let's get after this again. We're gonna do Web Technologies 101, and you might ask yourself, why do we even have to talk about the underlying technology if we just gonna work with building websites or web applications? Now, uh, as soon as you move past just building interfaces, but actually consuming data or using microservices or what have you, you need to understand the technology that powers the internet. Because if you don't, you won't be able to build anything that is meaningful, or you will just come across as a schmuck, So I've made the decision for you that it's good to touch upon some hardcore stuff, and I try to explain it as simple as possible, mainly because I don't personally understand the whole thing myself, but also that I don't think we need to dive super deep into these topics, but we need to touch upon them. And this is the first part of this talk, and on Thursday when we meet again, we will do more of the same thing, but focusing on actually using some of the concepts that we will be talking about today. I wanted to squeeze in a demo already today because I like demos and I like code alongs and so on, but it won't fly. We need to do it on Thursday. So, Web Technologies 101, Part 1. Let's rock and roll. I often use quotes in my talks. In the previous one, I quoted myself because I'm an egocentric person. But here I quote one of the greats, the big ones, Socrates. The only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing. One of my favorite quotes. We go with a bang. Summary. In this first part, we're going to talk a little bit more about web application development, front end versus back end, and then dive into web protocols. A lot of acronyms, people: IP, HTTP, URL, URI, TCP, and so on. In the second part, we're going to talk more about the request response cycle or the architecture of the web. We're going to talk about HTTP verbs, query strings, and we're going to build a small backend application using Express.js, just to showcase some of the concepts that we have been covering. So let's get after it. Basic terminology that we need to understand, and this is an attempt by me to kind of split things up into manageable chunks: websites or web applications, or generally in its simplest form, a collection of files stored on some own computers that are referred to as servers. Which brings us to, what is a server? Well, a server in this context is a computer that is used to host a website, meaning that they store files that could be like interpreted by browsers or showed to end users one way or another. But the thing is that these servers, they are connected to the internet and they are able to be located. They have addresses, and that's very important. So servers are computers that serve websites and can be found on the internet. We're going to talk a little bit on how they can be found. Usually by humans, they are found by something we called URL. I guess that's common sense, right? Uh, Clients are also computers that are connected to the internet, but they are not servers. So your laptops, desktops, mobile devices, they are all connected, and we usually refer to them as clients. And then you have browsers, which are programs, pieces of software that run on your computer or a phone, a client, and they load the websites, files, or the resources via your internet connections and show them to you on your screen. So website servers, clients, and browsers. So whatever happens in your browser is not necessarily or it's a effect of how your computer has behaved or what it has done and so on, communicating over the internet and receiving some information from a server. Yeah, that's an attempt at least to bring some order into this. Uh, the We're going to talk a little bit about front end, back end, full stack. Front end is of a web application is the part that your actual end users see or interact with, the stuff that people see in their browsers. That is the front end of the application. Meaning that a front end developer builds everything that you see when you visit a website, from the information it contains to the fonts and colors and drop down menus and all of that stuff, right? I usually try to stay away from, working with how things uh, look, because I'm not good at that, but I know how to manage data and how to display data at the right place and at the right time to users. Uh, the back end of a website consists of a server, an application, and quite often, not always, but very often a database. And consequently, a backend developer, a bit simplified, builds and maintains the technology that powers the components that enable the front end part of the website to exist in the first place. Uh, this involves, of course, DevOps, but it involves building the logic that will serve some data or serve some files and so on to the front end application. And then if we talk about the full stack, this is my own interpretation. This is highly opinionated, but a full stack developer works mostly on the server side, the way I look at it. But they can also speak the front end languages and be part of the front end team, or build the entire stack in a project. So let's dive into the tough stuff, the heavy duty stuff, the Internet Protocol, which is abbreviated IP. The Internet in itself consists of millions of interconnected smaller networks that allows computers and various type of different other devices to communicate with each other. And what the very foundation of the whole thing is the Internet Protocol, because which is basically a set of rules how the communication on the internet is supposed to work. So that's a very low level protocol on the network. And what it does is that it defines it defines it defines the structures of packets that holds the data that is supposed to be delivered from one place to another. So it is tasked with or challenged with delivering this data from a sender to a deliver to a destination host. A source host sends off a little bit of data, and a destination host receives it. So whenever you open up a browser and you type in facebook.com, for instance, or theguardian.com or .co.uk or whatever, you are sending off something called a request to that destination. It's a very small request telling the server that you want to communicate with that server. And that request travels over the internet to the server that is hosted by The Guardian, for instance. And that communication is handled by the internet protocol. That that road, or the actual um, the actual travel or path is being set by the IP. And but the internet protocol has another task, of course, that is necessary for that request to find its way to the source, to the destination host, and that is the address, right? So IP deals with addressing methods, so that this small package knows where it is supposed to end up with, and the TCP delivers that. That's another thing. But what actually happens is that when you send off a little bit of data through the internet, that data is being chopped into small packets, and it looks like confetti. So if you throw up a bit of confetti in the air, what IP is actually tasked with, together with TCP actually, is to take that confetti, move it over through the internet, and then take that confetti and align those pieces together in perfect order so that they can enter the destination host in the right way. So it recreates the data again. The data is split up and then recreated at the destination host. And that's pretty magical actually, because we're talking billions and billions of small packets that are traveling through this network that consists of millions of other small networks, and it almost always finds its destination. I think the error rate is extremely low on the internet, and that is a pretty revolutionary thing. If you think about that, there are millions and millions of requests, which means there are billions of confetti packets being thrown around at all times throughout every minute, every second, every millisecond on the internet. So that is what the internet protocol does, and it has been around since 60s, 70s, and it was revolutionary then, and it's still revolutionary today. Now, the transfer of data is one thing, but the applications need to understand the data that comes in, and there needs to be a set of rules to interpret that and react to requests and formulate responses. And the protocol that we use when we build web-based applications, for most part, is called HyperText Transfer Protocol, abbreviated HTTP. This is one of many other protocols that exists and are part of the internet, but this is the one that we use for building applications, or we build applications on top of that protocol. And it's a very simple idea. HTTP is built upon a model where a client makes a request for some data, and the server replies with that data. And it's a variant of the client-server architecture that we often refer to as request-response protocol. You request something and you get that. You request and you get that. You request and you get that. And that exchange happens in milliseconds, hundreds of times or thousands of times every time you use an application. And HTTP is imperative to understand at least the very basics of, because it comes into play for all developers today when we build distributed applications, one way or another. So back to IP for a second. By convention, all devices that are on a network, in this network, are provided with unique addresses. And I will not go super deep into how IP addresses or IP numbers work, but they are the identifiers that can identify every device that or a computer that is part of the internet. Uh, and as many, I don't know how many of you live in houses, but also in apartment buildings, you quite often have multiple entrances into a building, right? So you have a physical address on a specific street, and there is, number 10A or B or C. So there are multiple entrances into that building. You can go through the kitchen entrance into my house, or you can go through the main entrance into my house, for instance, in the villa where I live. Now the same thing goes for servers. Many servers have something we refer to as, or servers, not many, but servers do have ports, and ports are a way into that particular server, and they can differ a, a little bit depending on the purpose of you know of the communication, on how the communication is structured. We're going to talk a little bit more about the ports in a second. But an IP address looks something like this. It's a set of 4 numbers divided by a dot. Every number is represented by 8 bits, and there are 32 bits, 4 bytes of data that this this structure takes up. There are, of course, version 6. I will not covering that in this slide. We can talk about it in a different setting. But 172.16.254.1 is an IP address. It's an actual IP address. There are private networks also with a different structure of IP numbers. And then you have a colon, and then you have a number. In this case, you have an 80. I bolded it so you can see it. The port number is added at the end of the IP address. And that is the address of each server or each computer on the internet. The problem with IP numbers is that they are not very humanly readable, and they are putting people to sleep, like Ethan, for instance. So you can't really have a network and with a lot of IP numbers if humans are supposed to use them, right? Like Pedro, you would probably not remember if I say, hey, why don't you visit me on 172.16.254.1 and I can show you some real good stuff about whatever. You would go like, what? So you probably want that to be more humanly, more accessible for a person. And that's why we don't use IP numbers so much in everyday life. We use URLs. So we're going to talk about that later. But each IP address can and does contain hundreds of thousands of different ports, each used for a different communication purpose. And the port number 80 is often, but not always, used for HTTP requests. And when you do your local development, for those of you who have spun up a React application or a local server to work with your Vue apps or React apps or what have you, you often use port like 3000, 3001, 8080, 74, or 7434 or something like that. So there are different ports. And so that's why I'm telling you about all of this, because you will use ports when you develop things on your local machines later on, for one. But there are other reasons, of course. So let's talk about the URL. Right, when I went to school, my professor told me that only the normal people says URL. We, the cool kids on the block, we use the abbreviation URI. URI stands for Uniform Resource Identifier, and URL stands for Uniform Resource Locator. Both are exactly the same thing, but the true nerds in academia, they use URI for some reason. I don't know why. So if you stumble upon this abbreviation, URI or URL, know that they mean the same thing. I know, damn nerds. And URLs, or Uniform Resource Locators, are a way for us to translate those IP numbers that we can all agree upon are not very user-friendly to something that humans can remember and understand. For instance, theguardian.com, which is a newspaper. You know that because it's a well-known brand. So quite often your URLs, um, the URLs reflect the brand that they are supposed to promote. Coca-Cola, Volvo, The Guardian, what have you. Trump organization. Shit, I don't know. Now, so far so good. But let's take a look at the web address thing. I put it in quotes because it's a layman term, right? So let's take a look at the URL, because the URL can contain much more than just the locator, the host address, the address to the server that we want to invoke. So I took the liberty to take a screenshot of The Guardian. There's an article. Boris Johnson and Jeremy Corbyn were debating on television, and there was an article written about them in that newspaper. And we want to access that particular article. And if we take a look, you can't really see that on the screenshot, but the URL is fairly long. It's actually very long. It looks something like this, right? And we can take a look at this one, and we can just panic and say, shit, that looks like Greek. I will never be able to understand that. But the thing is that it doesn't necessarily have to be that very hard. And understanding URLs is also an important thing if you want to use them for something. Not necessarily to access that article, because you can click your way through it. You go to the main page, or you search for that article, and you will get a link, and you don't have to type anything in. But sometimes when you code, you actually have to build fairly advanced or fairly big URLs so that you can access the right data, so you can display it to your own end users. So let's take a look at this long URL and figure out that it's not that super complicated if you just dissect it properly. So the HTTP : / or HTTPS, that's the protocol, right? That's the hypertext transfer protocol. So we know that we will be using HTTP to make that request. Then we have, in this case, www.theguardian.com. And that is pretty self-evident. That's the host identifier. It tells you what server you want to access. And then you can have a colon saying 88, and that would be the port number. In this case, we didn't have that. It isn't needed. It's if you don't have a port on your host identifier, then something called a default port will be used, and the server knows about it. So sometimes you just don't have to say it out loud, and it's there anyway. It's going to be used nonetheless, right? So 88 is not visible in this particular URL. But then we have /politics /live /2019 nov 19 yada 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 yada. That is the path. That is a path to the place where the resource that you are looking for is physically located on the server, at least in theory. Now, if you look at your own file browser, like File Explorer, I think it's called in Windows, you can see that when you navigate to different folders, up in this address field, you can see folder name / folder name / and so on, right? This is exactly the same thing. The server is just a computer as yours, slightly more powerful and differently configured, but it is a computer. So in order to find a resource, find a file, it needs to know in what folder and subfolder to look for, and that is the path. Pretty straightforward. But then comes something that is kind of hard for a lot of people to understand, in the beginning at least. There is often a question mark, and then there is a word, an equal sign, and then some other content. Now in this case, we had page equals and then with colon block and then a lot of numbers. Okay, so what is that? Well, that question mark is an indicator to the browser or the server, rather the server in this case, sorry, that anything that will come after the question mark will be a key value pair. There will be a key name, in this case page, and the value would be whatever is after the equal sign. And that is a way for, it could be 8080 as well, but 80 is the default. So what follows the value in the value and the key is a setting, or a signal rather, to the server to take and interpret or act accordingly with, right? So in this case, I have no clue what page with block 5dd and a hashed number means, but I know that it sends something off to the server that is important for the server to know, so that I can see that particular article. So the question mark is important. It contains data that you send off to the server one way or another. In this case, I didn't make the call. The link was created for me and so on, right? But we have to know that these are query parameters, and they are necessary for the server to receive for some reason. And in the demo, when we will be working with Express.js, we will be experimenting a little bit with query parameters. And these are very, very important. It's a very important piece of information that you need to internalize, because if you want to build web-based applications in small, trivial, or more complex, you will make use of query params that will come into play. Okay, now there is also another part of this thing. Oh, I already talked about this, right? The protocol schema hosted in the path and the query string, right? Made up of query parameters. Sorry, I got a little carried away with the slides. Right. Just the thing about the path and the query string, they are optional. You don't have to have them. You don't have to tell the server what you want to see. If you just type in theguardian.com, you will end up on the main or index page of the Guardian. So that would be handled by the server. And the query string that we saw now is a string that usually comes with a sort of request that is the most common one, and that is the GET request. That every time you send off something from your browser, when you follow a link, or when you type in an address in your address field and hit enter, you are making a GET request over the HTTP protocol. And if we know that there is something called a GET request, then you can probably figure out that there are other types of requests as well. That is part 2 of this talk. So we will cover that later. So what did we learn? I've been talking so much, I didn't even have time to drink my lemonade. We spoke briefly about the different roles in or parts of what's comes into play in web application development. We talked about front end versus back end a little bit. We touched upon some of the protocols, which are sets of rules. Protocols is a fancy word for rules that powers the web or the internet in itself. And we touched upon internet protocol, the HyperText transfer protocol, and the URLs, or just to make Pedro happy, URIs. And I think that would be enough of theory, because there's been a lot of theory, and try to internalize parts of this this thing. Things or the bits of the puzzle will hopefully fall into place on Thursday when we meet again, and we will do more of a practical session where we will be using these technologies, these parts, the request response, and building a small web application. Yeah, that's going to do it for us today. Thank you very much for your cooperation and sticking out. hanging out with me. We won't be doing Q&As because sound is not working. So I will end the stream now. You guys can stick around for a few more minutes if you want. And Twitch, YouTube, see you next time. Every Tuesday and Thursday at 5:30 p.m. UTC we will be online.